if you're dealing with depression or anxiety or any of those things, there's this idea of if you can name the monster, then you can start to face it.
That's right.
And start combating it, really. And what you just talked about, those holy habits help you do that too. That you can get into. If you want humility, then you have to start acting humble and those sorts of things. But really these what, if we're talking about naming the monster a bit, what are these three motives for misbehavior that you have witnessed in your career?
Well, there's a chapter in here. It's really kind of about misplaced worship, involving a guy who was lived on the streets in our city named Santa Claus. And this guy kind of reveals how most crimes, if I'm really honest, are about misplaced worship. It's about idolatry. Almost every crime is motivated by a form of strong idolatry. And here's what I mean, is that it turns out that rather than worship the creator of all good things, we worship and twist the three things, the three categories that God has given us, which are the financial greed, material stuff, wealth, blessings that way, sexual lust or relationships, love, or what we think is love. That stuff we've distorted as well. Or the third, which is the pursuit of power, which is probably 70% of all stupid behavior because it's so encompassing. It's so, and so this particular guy was murdered in our town. I just couldn't figure out what he had to offer in any of these three things that would motivate somebody to kill him, because he was homeless and he didn't possess any money. He certainly didn't have any position within the community, and he wasn't the object of a sexual desire. So what is it that would cause someone to kill this guy? Well, it turns out, I won't give it away, but in this particular story, just a few things irritated another homeless guy enough to kill him. And why were they so little? He was killed for basically nothing. Well, it's because when we make an idol of something, there is no nothing. Everything's a big deal because this is your idol. Like, I might kill you for $3. Yeah. Well, why? Because money is the idol. Now, you might think, well, $3, is that worth a murder? Well, it's because I've taken this thing that God has created, which is for our good and for his glory, sex, money, power, and we have focused on it. Instead of going the additional step to get past it to the creator, we stop with what we can see, what we can touch, what we can experience. And we don't think that, God is often hidden to us. So we stop there, and then you're stuck with this. Okay, so now what do I do? So now you've twisted and distorted something that you really have made a priority, overly prioritized it, so that, and by the way, if whatever you worship, that's what's going to become your master. And you're not going to allow anything to touch it, bruise it, scratch it. It's your master. Remember when you bought your first really good new car? Okay, I've only had a few new cars, and they've all been Hyundais and a Isuzu Rodeo. Okay, so they're not like stellar cars. Okay, pretty cheap cars. But because I didn't have new cars until I was much older, because I was working as a cop. I was buying used stuff or getting stuff handed down to me. When I finally got a new car, well, it's like that first scratch. Like, you need to scratch that car soon, quickly, so you can get over it, right? Otherwise, you're protecting it. You're parking it in the corner. Why are you doing that? Because you've turned this thing into an idol, and you don't let anybody scratch your idols. So it turns out that most of us, when we get this desperate, when we do something dramatic, it's because we have turned something into such an idol that the slightest thing has now threatened it, and we don't allow people to threaten our idols. So a lot of what we see in criminal work is, and if you think about it that way, now I used to always say it this way, like, it's just sex, money, and power. So you just look in those three categories. And I never thought about it as idolatry. I never thought about it as misplaced worship. I just thought of it as, okay, this is 1 John 2. This is like, okay. Now, although I wasn't a Christian when I discovered these principles, they are in 1 John 2. So I think that's the kind of stuff that if you know that. Now, here's what's interesting. So let's say you know that these are the three ways you can mess up, and you're a pastor. Well, most elder boards, most deacons, they're going to protect all you need to do is protect your pastor in those three areas. Those are the only three areas he's going to mess up, if he messes up at all. So you're going to say, okay, I'm going to guard him in terms of how much income he can make. We're going to make sure he's not, somehow got his hands in the money of the church. We're going to make sure that he is always around other people, that there's accountability, so he can never be involved in one-on-ones with women, whatever you're going to do to protect him from the sex thing. Mm-hmm. But when we get to the third category, we still want our pastor to be famous, mm-hmm. because that's going to grow our church. So we are willing to protect our leaders in sex and money. But when it comes to power and authority and respect and platform, oh, suddenly we're like, oh no, let it go, let it go. Well, here's the problem. And I've said this for years. Nobody scratches one of these itches without scratching the others. As a matter of fact, it's typically one of those itchy things that opens the door to the others. And that's why you have to moderate celebrity. Trusted authority is one thing. But when people treat you like so this is one of the things that took me off the stage. And I still do some local events, and I'll still travel to certain airports because there's direct flights from where I am. So I'll still do some things, of course. But I was becoming more and more uncomfortable with was that when you're on an elevated stage, whether you think you're guarding yourself from celebrity or not, you're not really, because they see you that way.